6. Yeah, we'll see how far we get. I don't know if we'll get the chapter done or not. We won't rush. Genesis chapter 26. Dylan, if you want to start us off, verses 1 through 6.
All right. There was a famine in the land besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. And the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, that in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Isaac dwelt in Gerar.
Okay, that's an abrupt ending. Sorry.
Sorry, that's what it says.
It sounded like you were going to continue. But that's good. So Isaac, this chapter is all about Isaac. It's really the only one we get that's entirely focused on him, besides when he meets his bride. And he faces many of the same areas of testing as Abraham did. There's a very definite pattern as we go through of him dealing with the same things, facing the same situations. Some he handles the same and some he handles differently. So we will see that. But it is true that there's often this pattern between generations, because we can lay the foundation through our walk with God, through our example. We can lay the foundation, but you can't exempt them from trials or facing their own temptations and situations. You just can't, because that's how character is formed, by going through those things, right? So the first area that Isaac faces of temptation that we read about is the temptation to run, to escape. And that would constantly be a temptation for his descendants too, for the people of Israel. Whenever there was trouble, it was always, well, back to Egypt. Back to Egypt. Egypt was seen kind of as the breadbasket of the ancient world, in the sense that when there was a famine, Egypt always had food. Even before Joseph's day, Egypt was kind of the safe haven in times of trouble. And so that would constantly be a problem we see it in the wilderness, of course, when they're wandering around and there's lack of food or lack of water. Why didn't we stay in Egypt, right? They're yearning back for Egypt. So he faces this temptation. What is he going to do when the famine comes, when things get hard? What are we going to do? Are we going to turn and go back to the things of the world, or are we going to stick it out, if you will, in the wilderness, but in the land that God has promised us? So there was famine in the area where he lived, which was Beer Lahai Roi. We know that from previous chapters. But he goes to Gerar, the land of the Philistines. And the Gerar, or how'd you say it, Gerar?
Gerar.
I don't know which one it is, to be honest. But I'm going to call it Gerar. And the land of the Philistines, where the Philistine lives, it was within the border of the land that was promised to Abraham. So in him going there, he's not leaving that promised land. But what probably was happening was he went there kind of on his way to Egypt. But before he continues on, the Lord speaks to him and gives him very clear instructions. Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Stay here. And we saw this command echoed before in Abraham's life. And every commandment of the Lord always comes with a promise. This is true in our lives too. There's always a promise. Now, sometimes it's explicitly stated. Like we have, for example, in the 10 Commandments, we have honor your father and your mother, that it may be well with you and your days may be long in the land. Other times it's not explicitly stated, but there's always a benefit to it. Sometimes that's immediately apparent, sometimes it takes a while, but there's always a reward. And here, after God gives a command to him to live and to stay in the land that was promised, he gives him the same promise that we saw. We're really familiar with it by this point. The promise that was given to Abraham, but it's now repeated for the first time, at least that's recorded, to Isaac directly. Before it was to Abraham, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Well, now it is to Isaac. The same promise that God gave to Abraham repeated. And all of the same elements are there. The land that he will inherit, the nation that will be made of his descendants, and the fact that all of the earth would be blessed through his descendant. And at the end of this, he gives them the reason for the promise. I swore to Abraham your father. Why? Because Abraham obeyed my voice. And he kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, my laws. And so there's this implication that the promise was given to Abraham because of his obedience. So Isaac also would be wise to follow in the same path of obedience in order to receive the promise. The promise is non-conditional, but there's this implication here that, hey, there's a blessing that comes with obedience. Because that's why Abraham was given the promise. So Isaac, you'd be wise to walk in the same way and to stay in the same vein. So Isaac was obedient. He stayed in Gerar. So he passed that test, okay? He did not run away when things got hard and go back to where it was easier. He passed that test. However, living in Gerar in close proximity with the Philistines would bring some problems. And it is here that he will face another test, also one that Abraham faced, and that is the temptation to lie. So verse 7, if you will.
And the man of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, She is my sister. For he feared to say, She is my wife, lest, said he, the man of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon.
It just feels like a repeat in history. Exactly. We've heard this story twice before. We had Abraham in Egypt. We had Abraham in Gerar in the exact same place saying, oh, I'm scared they're going to kill me because my wife's so beautiful. An exact same scenario. And in fact, this one is worse because, not to say that there's varying degrees of truthfulness, but at least Abraham was telling a half-truth. It was also a half-lie, so it doesn't excuse it. But Sarah, his wife, was his sister and his wife. But now Isaac's repeating the same lie, and Rebecca is not his sister. You can't stretch it. She's a cousin, like a twice cousin once removed or something random. So he's definitely taken this and applied it to his life in not a good way. The Bible doesn't teach generational curses. Some people talk about generational curses, these curses that are passed down from line to line. The Bible does not teach generational curses, but it does teach generational patterns. And we can, areas of our life that we do not heal, that are not healed, that are not surrendered, we often pass those on to either to children or to those that we are influencing. It can be any kind of those that we have influence over. And we talked about this even, I guess you weren't there. But for fostering, of course, we have to take random courses, and there's one on therapeutic parenting. And this was a big emphasis during this, and we, of course, we had to dive back into our childhoods and all that stuff. But it was a big emphasis that in areas where we were wounded, perhaps as children, well, if those are not healed and addressed, often that cycle continues. And it's not a curse or something like that. It's just simply they never learned how to deal with emotions in a proper way, or they never dealt how to deal with shame in a proper way, or whatever it may be. And the only example that they have is a negative way of dealing with it. And so that gets passed down. And so we have to be careful. And that's why it's just so important to live a life of surrender, to allow the Lord, because he will, if we're surrendered to the Lord, he will at some point deal with those wounded areas, to allow him to do that work and to be as healed and as whole as possible so that we are not passing that on. Because Isaac had not been alive when Abraham went to Egypt and when he went to Gerar and he lied about his wife. Isaac wasn't alive. He was thought of, I guess, but he wasn't realized in any way, shape, or form yet. But the root issue of Isaac's lie is the same issue that Abraham had. Because it wasn't just dishonesty for the sake of dishonesty. There was a reason behind it. It was fear. It was fear. And often when people are dishonest, there's usually a reason behind it. And fear is often, not always, but fear is often that reason. There's the fear of, well, if I tell the truth, then this person will not love me anymore, or I won't be wanted, or I'll be left, or in this case, I'll be unsafe. A fear of losing his wife, a fear of, losing his own life. And again, so it's that idea of when we have those wounded places where we're still dealing with trauma, it allows things to take root that otherwise would not. I'm not saying that Isaac never dealt with this fear. I don't know that. Abraham, I'm not blaming him for it. But it does go to show that there's this pattern that happens. And Jacob, also, Isaac's son, I guess you could probably connect this. He deals with dishonesty in his life as well. Or with a deception, kind of a more sneaky version of it. They started to get smarter, I think. But it's still dishonesty. But I will say that Jacob changed a lot in his life. And it does show that it is possible to overcome these things. But it is a process. So Isaac did not pass this temptation. So he has one good, he passes one test, and he fails the next. And it's right after, it's on the heels of such a powerful experience, and we just kind of brush over it. But to Isaac, this was a big deal. The Lord appeared to him, not just Abraham, not just his father, not just stories passed down. He himself heard from the Lord directly about the covenant and the promise that was given, not just to Abraham, but to him and his descendants. So this is a big, big deal. And then immediately we see him going into Gerar and lying. So we have to be careful when we're on the high moments, when we have a powerful experience with God, or we have an achievement or a success in our life. And it's not to be negative or down on it. We celebrate it. But also don't get so comfortable in it that you think, oh, well, nothing can take me down now. I'm super spiritual and I won't fall. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 that he who thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. So just stay humble, in other words, and always, be in mind that sometimes, and often this is the way it is, sometimes trials and temptations, whatever it is, those are two different things, but whichever it is, often they will follow one after the other. And so it's just to always be ready, I guess. Always be ready for whatever might happen, to seek the Lord's counsel. Obviously he did with not going down to Egypt, but apparently he didn't with the wife situation. So let's read and find out what happened. Verses 8 through 11.
And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. And Abimelech called to Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife, and how saidest thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, What is this thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have laid with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, He that touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death.
Okay, again, it sounds like a repeat story. The lie continued for quite a while. I don't know if you caught that, when he had been there a long time. So he got away with this apparently for, I don't know how long a long time is, but, it wasn't immediately discovered. But eventually, lies are almost always reveal themselves. Numbers 3:23 says, Be sure your sin will find you out. No matter how well concealed we might think a lie or a dishonesty might be hidden, well, I mean, I've heard of scenarios where people thought, they were living maybe a secret part of their life and thinking that they had it all covered and under control, and it just Sometimes I've seen it where the Lord would put somebody in the right place at the right time when they thought there was no danger, and it exposes things, not to hurt anyone, but it exposes things so that they can be brought back into the right path, right? And so I guess this is kind of what happened for Isaac, perhaps. It was a protection that they were found out, because someone may have taken Rebecca and taken her as a wife, and there would have been immorality involved, and the punishment that would come on it. So it was a protection that they were discovered. But it's just so important for us that we build a life of honesty so we don't have to hide. So we don't have to be ashamed, so you don't have to worry, oh, what if I see a church person while I'm doing it? It's like, well, it shouldn't matter, right? We just live lives of honesty that, we don't have anything to hide. If something comes out, it's not embarrassing for us because it's not dishonest. So Abimelech looks out a window. He sees them sporting, the King James Version says. Other translations say caressing, fondling, showing affection, showing endearment. In other words, they were acting in a way that brothers and sisters would not act. And so it was fairly obvious that there was a husband-wife relationship there. But it is interesting, in the Hebrew, that word sporting or showing endearment, it is very, very close. It's kind of how do you say it, like another form of the word that from Isaac's name. Remember, Isaac's name means laughter. So this is like a word that's just adjacent to that. It refers to like laughing or playing around, horsing around, whatever. So there's they're just playfully interacting with one another, but it caught them out. And so again, the man of God, Isaac, is rebuked by a pagan king, just like happened to Abraham. Again, the Philistines prove more righteous than the one who's supposed to be the covenant partner of God. But one failure does not determine the story. And even though Isaac, I don't know. I don't understand it, because I'm like, I think he would have learned from Abraham. Surely Abraham would have told him, hey, this is how it turned out. Don't do the same thing I did. I would think. I don't know. But that one failure does not dictate the rest of his life. And things start to turn around for him and get a whole lot better here. In verses 12 through 14.
Then Isaac sowed in the land and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. For he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herd, and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him.
So Isaac is very, very, very blessed. He has all the wealth inherited from his father. We know Abraham was incredibly wealthy as well, especially in his number of servants and his number of cattle. He was incredibly, incredibly blessed. And so that alone, since Isaac received most of that alone would have made Isaac a very well-off man. But Isaac is also, he's not just the trust fund baby. That's just, I don't have to do anything. No. He's taking it, he's investing it, he's working with it, he's continuing to build wealth as well. And whereas Abraham was more, again, flocks and herds, Isaac apparently is also farming as well. And so he sowed in Gerar, and in the same year he got 100 times back what he had sowed. And that's an incredible harvest. From a biblical standpoint, if you think about the parable of the sower that Jesus taught, he taught about all the different grounds that seed would fall on, right? And the seed that fell on good ground said it would bear fruit either 30-fold, 60-fold, or 100-fold. 100-fold was the top. That's a very, very, very high yield. And that it's because the Lord is blessing him. And you can kind of understand why the Philistines start to envy him. Because Isaac doesn't have anything that they don't have. I mean, he might have wealth and all that stuff, but I mean as far as the farming. He has the same soil, they're in the same land, the same sunshine, the same weather patterns, the same rain, he's got neighbors, and he's blessed, And I don't know how blessed they were, but apparently not as blessed. Because God has his hand on Isaac. And that's how it is. And when we talk about, living our lives according to God's financial plan, and, we do things that seem very, very strange to other people that are not familiar with the Word of God. Things like tithing and offerings and generally even some of the way we handle our finances potentially. If we're, following Proverbs advice and all of those things, it can be strange to a lot of people that don't understand that. But this is basically the way that it works. It's not that we'll have that God gives us more money than everybody else. I mean, he's capable of giving us better jobs and wages and who knows, money from wherever. He's capable of that. But generally, it's just that we have the same things. But yet when we put God first, it goes further. And probably a lot of that's because we save money. The price of alcohol, oh my goodness, we save so much money by not going out to the bars all the time. When I hear the prices, I'm like, oh my goodness. Pardon?
Makeup.
I know. We save a lot of money on a lot of things. But no, and seriously, it's just that God takes care of us. And we are blessed. We are blessed. But with that blessing, at least for Isaac, there also came conflict. Because the Philistines envied him. And envy is a sneaky little sin. I was thinking about this as I was reading this. It's a sneaky little thing. I mean, it's in lists in the New Testament. It's listed with these sins like witchcraft and immorality, homosexuality, idolatry. Like, it's listed up there with what we consider the big ones, right? And yeah, I don't know. It's maybe not one that we think of all the time. And like I said, it's so sneaky. Envy is more than just, I want to be blessed like them. It's more than just the Philistines looking at Isaac and be like, oh, I want to be blessed like that too. Because actually, that attitude, if they wanted to be blessed like him, they could seek the Lord like him, and, maybe it would happen. But it's to the point where if I'm not going to be blessed like that, I don't want him to be blessed like that. Right? And those sound like two different things. I've looked at my own life and I've thought that was, I look at what other people may have or what, whatever particular thing or situation I'm envying, and thought, well, I don't wish ill on them. I just would like that too, but I've realized that the line between those things is very, very thin, actually. They're not hugely different. Because once you start living a life that's always looking at what you don't have and what others have, it becomes very easy to look at their lives and be like, well, what did they do to deserve that? Why do they get that and I don't? Why did God answer their prayer and not mine? Why are they living a life that seems, and it can be, easy to cross that line and become, maybe not wish ill on them, but just kind of bitter, just kind of, envy is very, very sneaky. And James 3:16 says that where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. It's a root of a lot of things. A lot of the things that we would easily recognize as sin, they have a root that's maybe envy. And that's, again, it's in the 10 Commandments as well. Thou shalt not covet. So the Philistines' envy caused them to attack Isaac, and specifically his wells. So verses 15 through 18.
For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with dirt. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. And Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar, and dwelled there. And Isaac digged again the wells of the water, which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and he called their names after the names by which his father had called them.
Okay. So obviously wells were essential to life in the desert. If you did not have a well, and you were not by any other source of water, well, you don't live that long. Yeah, you will not do well. So they were essential, but they were also difficult and expensive to dig. It took a lot of servants and time and all that stuff. I mean, it's still still a major undertaking today with all of our modern, equipment. So I can imagine what it would be like then. And so, of course, if you wanted to drive somebody out of the land, that you didn't want them there, well, if you get rid of their wells, it's a pretty good way to get rid of them. They won't be sticking around for too much longer. So they had filled in the wells of Abraham, perhaps after Abraham had moved on, or perhaps to try to, maybe there's animosity there with Abraham, whatever, but they had been filled up. And Abimelech tells Isaac, get out, go away, find somewhere else to live. And the reason being because Isaac was mightier than them, and this is important for the story in a little bit. He is mightier than they are. So Isaac does move, but he doesn't go very far. He goes from Gerar to the valley of Gerar. I don't know the difference there, but it's just kind of moving locations within the same area, basically. And he begins to redig the wells of his father that had been filled in. And Isaac, this chapter is just all about wells. Some people have called him the man of wells because he's just always digging.
This chapter has depth.
It has a lot of depth. Yes.
Wow.
The puns are punning tonight. So we're going to see a lot about well building in these next few verses. And I wanted to ask a question from talking about wells. Again, always trying to bring out practical application from these Old Testament stories, right? So my question is, how is your well? How is your well today? All of us, we need to have a source where we're daily drawing from the water of life, right? We know that Jesus is the living water. We need to have a well where we can be drawing from that source. And if we're going to have revival, it's going to take a well. Not a physical well, obviously, but a spiritual well. And there's lots of churches that are, and we can all be guilty of falling in this trap. Well, what's it going to take to bring revival? What's it going to take to see the things happen that we're praying for? And we're always looking for like some new solution, right? Like, what's the key that's going to unlock this person? What's the key that's going to, unlock revival or whatever we're praying for? But it's really not, we don't need these new solutions. We need old solutions. We need old wells. The old wells are still good. Wells that have been the same since Jesus' day. The Word of God, prayer, denying ourselves, serving others, all of those things, those are still good. And if you look at every revival that's ever started, it started out of a place of prayer. It's not started because somebody came up with a new method of evangelism. It started in prayer. It started in a hunger for God's word. It's, started with somebody that committed their life and sacrificed for it. And so the resources that sustain previous generations of believers, they're still available. Stories we've heard, if you can go all the way back to the book of Acts, the same resources are there. The well is still available. It's Jesus. It's his spirit. Nothing's changed. It's just we have to sometimes do a little bit of digging. And I think that's often, and I'll speak for myself so I don't throw anybody else under the bus, but I think that's often where we fall short. That's where I fall short sometimes. I want to see the book of Acts. I want to see the miracles. Well, they went daily to the temple for the hour of prayer, probably multiple times a day. When I see the way that they lived, all things common, daily going from house to house, breaking bread and in prayers. Well, am I willing to dig out the well? Am I willing to dig down to that same depth that they had? So how is your well? Do you need to maybe dig the well out a little bit? Verses 19 through 22.
And Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well for running water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdmen, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the name of the well Esek, because they quarreled with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, because he said, "For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land."
Okay, so apparently he's digging old wells. He's also digging new wells. He's just digging wells all over the place. But there's problems. So the first well he finds is running water, which is the best thing that you want, right? A fresh spring is is always the best kind of water. So that's great. But then the Philistines come and steal it and claim that it's theirs after he's done all the work. Figures. They let him dig it and then they come in and claim it. And so he named it Esek, which means quarrel or contention. Then well number 2, same thing. He digs it, or his servants dig it, and the Philistines come in and say, no, it's ours. They fight over it, and he names it Sitna, which means enmity or opposition. So things are kind of, elevating from a disagreement to enemies. And if you notice what Isaac does, he doesn't stay and fight. He just moves on. He lets them have it. He doesn't fight for his rights. He doesn't, and remember, he's mightier than they. So he could easily, presumably, win a battle if it was needed. But instead, he yielded and just moved on. Isaac, in his attitude, his personality, was much less confrontational than his father. He was a peacemaker. That was his kind of one of his qualities. He was a peacemaker at heart. And it doesn't make Abraham's way wrong or Isaac's way wrong or right. But there's times we have to confront. And then there are times when it's better just to walk away. And just got to pray for the Lord to give us discernment to know when is which and not get it mixed up, right? So then the third well he digs is further away. They don't try to steal this one. He's finally got room for his tents and his cattle and his herds and all that stuff. So he calls it Rehoboth, which literally means spaciousness, roominess. And so finally he's got room to breathe without constantly fighting for every single little thing. And he gives God the glory. Even though Isaac, or his servants specifically, have put in the work to dig the well, he recognizes that it's the Lord that's made room for them. It would be very easy for someone in Isaac's shoes to say, well, I dug the well. Like, through my own perseverance and resilience, finally I have made room for myself. But he gives God the glory because he recognizes that the Lord's hand is on him, and it is only through him that it's possible. So verses 23 through 25 now.
And he went up from thence to Beersheba. And the Lord appeared unto him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and will bless you, and multiply your seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he built an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well.
Okay. So Isaac, he's still living that nomadic life that Abraham lived, the life of a pilgrim or a stranger in the land, even with all the wealth and the blessings. So he's moving to Beersheba. He pitches his tent there. Again, we have the Lord appearing to him and reiterating that promise again and telling him, do not fear, which is important because that was a struggle point for Isaac. Do not fear. And fear is still one of the greatest enemies, by the way, that we face as Christians. It is so huge. Fear of the enemy, fear of failure, fear of, whatever. It's the opposite of faith. So do not fear is a very, very important command for us as a Christian. I recently read a devotional on these specific verses, which was just good timing, where Isaac there's 3 things he has here in his community, if you will, because, it's him and his servants, right? He's got a tent, obviously, to live in. He has an altar, and he has a well. And this devotional that I was reading was comparing it to our lives and the 3 things that we need in our circles, in our communities. We need that we need to be strong, I guess. Our tent is our home and our family. We don't ditch our family or put the church or our ministry above our family. Our family is really, really important, that we have that strong home life. But then the altar is also important. It's our relationship with God. It's our worship. It's our connection with him. And then the well is our community, or because that well was where everybody gathered, or more specifically for a believer, the church, because it's where we come together and we draw from the living water together, and we also have that fellowship. So thought that was interesting. It's kind of a freebie for you to think about, but yeah, we need all three. We need our home, we need an altar, and we need a well. So we're going to finish this off. I know we're not finishing the chapter, but we're going to finish it off verses 26 through 33. And then it switches topics, so I'm fine with leaving the rest for later.
Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar and Ahuzeth, one of his friends, and Phicol, the chief captain of his army. And Isaac said unto them, Wherefore come ye to me? See, ye hate me, and have sent me away from you. And they said, We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee. And we said, Let there be now an oath between us, even between us and you, and let us make a covenant with you, and that thou wilt do us no hurt, as we have not touched thee, and as we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now the blessed of the Lord. And he made them a feast, and they did eat and drink. And they rose up betimes in the morning, and swear one to another, and Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. And it came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came, and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and said unto him, We have found water. And he called it Sheba, where therefore the name of the city is Beersheba unto this day.
Okay. That word betimes, by the way, it just means, in Old English, it just means early. They left early in the morning. So while in Beersheba, Isaac receives a visit from Abimelech. The same Abimelech, presumably, who told him, Get out, we don't want you here, because you're mightier than us. They'd parted on bad terms, and so Isaac's question is very reasonable. Why are you here? Like, you want to get rid of me. Why are you coming to visit me? This is backwards, right? But what happened is they could see the blessings of God on his life. And because he was blessed, because he was mighty and wealthy and all those things, they didn't want to be on bad terms with him in case it came to a point of war, right? They want to be at peace. They don't want what God is blessing, they don't want to be against. So looking in hindsight, we can see the wisdom of Isaac's actions. Because it seemed like, well, he always was losing because he was choosing not to fight back. He was just giving up wells and just moving on, and how frustrating that would have been. But in actuality, he diffused a situation that could have ended up in a large battle or an all-out war. And instead, he has Abimelech coming to him to seek peace. And so him being a peacemaker wasn't even in the fact that he was approaching and asking for peace. It was just in his actions. They were conducive to peace. But being a peacemaker is not always the easy route to go. They seal their treaty or agreement with a meal as a sign of friendship, as was done in the culture. And then when they leave, we got another well, of course. Isaac's servants hit water in another well. This was another one of Abraham's well that they were digging out. Beersheba, the same place that Abraham had made a covenant with the Philistine leaders. So this whole thing's a parallel with Abraham's life, like all the way through. And so that's about the end of Isaac's story, other than just what we see with his sons. So Isaac now has peace with his neighbors. All is well. But things are not so peaceful at home. And that is our cliffhanger to hold us over until next week. Yes, I need the little music. So, Simon, why don't you close us off in prayer and just pray for us as we go?